was empowering to you and to your students. Again, my name is Nicki Mitchell, and I'm a guidance counselor. And so for the past 7 years, I have agreed very, very happily to run this workshop because first and foremost, I'm a parent, and I'm now a high school parent. So this is probably the most humbling year for me because having worked with high schoolers for the last 17 years, it's like, oh, wow, okay, this is real. So I really do relate very much to the process that we're all going through. But I enjoy being here because I know that there is a lot of information. And if you're not in academia, even though you might be helping your student, there's just a lot to remember. I know from year to year when we go to different conferences as counselors, things change. Requirements might change, deadlines might change. And so it's hard enough for me to keep up with it. And so I know that it is a lot of information. So what I've planned out for today is just kind of an overview because I've done this for several years, and sometimes I'll change it up a little bit because I think to myself, well, if the same people come, I don't want to say the same thing over and over again. The nice thing is most of you look new. How many people here, just by show of hands, is this that you've been here before, that you came like last year or previous years? Okay, perfect. So most of you are new. And so what the team or the committee told me when I said, well, how do you want me to gear my presentation? They said, just do what you do. Just help them understand the basics. So I would like to just kind of gauge very quickly like what grade level of student we're dealing with. And there are not that many of us in here, so if we can go around very quickly and you can just state the name of the school that your son or daughter goes to and the grade level, that would help me to kind of know where we're coming from. And one last thing, when Talithia comes back, she does have extra copies of the PowerPoint, so everybody will get that if you missed it when you first came in. So can we start back here? Just your son or daughter's grade level and school?
My son goes to Rancho High School. He's in 9th grade, and my daughter goes to Etowah Intermediate School in 7th grade.
Okay, thanks.
My daughter goes to North Forest High School, and she's in the 11th grade.
Okay.
Both my daughters go to El Cerrito Middle School, and that's in Corona.
Okay.
So that's 7th and 8th grade.
Perfect, middle school, okay.
My daughter goes to Carmel High School, and she's a senior.
Yes, she is, okay. Right here.
My daughter goes to Western School for Girls, and she's a freshman. Two daughters, one goes to Temecula Prep. She's in 7th grade in Temecula. Another one goes to Vista Mariana High School, and she's in 10th grade.
Okay.
Two boys, East Heritage Elementary, 4th and 5th grade.
Perfect.
Three boys at Etowah Colony,
Okay.
4th, 5th, and 2nd. So it's been an early start.
That's great, that's perfect.
Grandchildren. My grandson is in the 5th grade. My granddaughter's in the 7th grade. They both go to Lesbian and Nancy Commander.
Okay.
And I'm here from my daughter because she's at a function in LA for AKA.
Okay, thank you for being here.
I have a daughter. She's in the 4th grade. She's in Upper Michigan Academy.
Okay.
I have a daughter. She's at Foothill Knowles in Upland, and she's in 6th grade.
6, okay.
I have a daughter. She's in 8th grade at Goddard Middle School in Bolivar.
Okay.
I have a freshman daughter at Etowah High School.
Mhm.
I have a freshman daughter at Etowah High School and a son at Sonora Elementary.
Okay.
I'm a teacher at A.D. Miller High School, so I teach freshmen, but I don't have any children of my own.
Okay, so a whole bunch of children, that's right.
No children either, but I'm a 10th grade English teacher at A.D. Miller.
Okay, thank you so much for being here and bringing the students here today.
And I have a 9th grader at A.D. Miller High School.
Mhm.
Before academy and school business. I'm a senior in high school at Los Osos High School, and I have a 6th grader at Etowah Intermediate School.
Okay.
I have a 6th grade son at Etowah Intermediate.
Okay, I think that's everybody. So for my parents who have seniors, you guys are the pros, okay? Somebody has a senior and a 6th grader. And then for parents of seniors, some of this information, it's what you've already done, but I could say from personal experience, you've done it very, very well. Her daughter is mine, and I would adopt her if I could. She's dynamic. So thank you for sharing that. That helps me to gauge. And everybody's in the right place. The information you're going to receive is very, very appropriate because it's never too early to start planning. And I think the sooner you can get this information, even though there may be subtle changes along the way with deadlines and different things, it just starts to plant that seed so that you can know what to expect. And especially when it comes to course planning, we're going to spend some time talking about course planning, because sometimes you'll recognize, wait a minute, if I'm trying to get here, but I'm only here, that's when you start thinking about what am I going to do to utilize summer school or different things to help me get on track where I want to be. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I like to keep this kind of casual and very interactive. So if you have questions as I'm going along, please feel free to raise your hand and contribute, especially those of you who have had experiences that when we're talking about something, it might touch upon something that you've gone through or experienced that you could say, you know what, this is something that worked very well. This is a program that I utilized. This is what today is about. It's really about networking, not only for the students, for the parents as well, so that we can get a better sense of how to become a village and really help each other raise our children. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And like I said, this is really just kind of some basics. So some of this, especially those of you who have high schoolers, you may already be familiar with the A through G requirements. Just a show of hand, how many people have some familiarity with A through G? Anybody? A few of you? Okay. So we're going to go in depth a little bit just because I think it's very important. And the more you know, the more you can empower your students and hold them accountable for really making sure that they understand what this is all about. So the A through G requirements are the basic admission requirements that the University of California, or the UCs, and the Cal State system uses. And both institutions require the same 15 college prep courses in these A through G subject areas, okay? The UC requires that 11 of those courses must be completed by the end of 11th grade. And both systems require that students earn C's or better, okay? That's somewhat of a myth. I'll tell you right now, this notion of a C, yes, they say C's or better, but I always tell students, focus on the or better. Because truth be told, if they got all C's or majority C's in those classes, their GPA would not qualify them. They would not stand out, and they wouldn't be competitive. So even though students see this documentation and they'll read it and they'll say, well, all I have to do is get a C, that really isn't the case. A lot of it is also going to depend on the selectivity of campuses. So not all campuses are created equal in the sense that they're not all going to be as open to all students, not in the negative sense, but just some are more selective. And I describe that for students as saying they'll get this many applicants for this many spots, okay? Doesn't mean that they're a better school. Sometimes it could be a great school, but it may not be the best school for you, but it's selective. They're going to be very, very picky. So understanding that will help your sons and daughters recognize that, look, the teacher may say, well, you have a C. It's okay. You're passing the class. That is not going to align with what your goals are. So I always emphasize that. There's a link there, and I was hoping that I could actually get this document for you today, and I wasn't able to get it from the UC system. But that's a link that if you go to that link, you'll be able to get this academic planner. And I like this because it is a way for you to help your student chart exactly what they need to do, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade year. And one thing I'll say about the UC or the A through G requirements, it's a nice general umbrella. So if students are meeting those A through G requirements, they're going to meet the requirements for most private colleges as well. So it's not a matter of, well, do I have to do that? I might go to APU, or I might go to USC or some other private school. Meeting those A through G's is going to cover you pretty much wherever you go. So I'd encourage you to go ahead and download this because, again, I just like the fact that it's interactive and it forces your student to then say, okay, if you know that you need to take you need to be in at least Algebra 1 by your 9th grade year or higher, let's plot out how high you're going to get by your senior year. And if you have a very strong math student who can take a summer math course, then you can incorporate that to say, wow, you may even be able to get into BC calculus by your senior year if math is a strength and you're motivated, because maybe we can fit in a summer pre-calculus class. So again, a lot of it depends on your student, but I really like how this is laid out. So I'm sorry I don't have the actual copies of this, but the link is right there. I also provided the link for the CSU mentor site, and that one, it gives you an overview of the Cal State University system. And so again, if you're wanting to explore campuses, there are 23 of them. Let your students start to explore. Just pick a campus and say, hey, we live really close by to Cal State San Bernardino or Cal Poly Pomona. Let's research a little bit and find out what does their average admitted student look like? What does their GPA? What are their test scores? Just to start to get students to think, how do I qualify for that particular campus? Then infused in this, I try to give you different tasks, things that you can actually take away to tell your student maybe today. So one task would be make sure that your student understands how to fulfill these requirements at her school. Most often these details are on the high school website, and your school's child's school counselor can provide guidance in this area as well. It's a good idea for your student to review this information annually. I know at my high school, I work at Claremont High School, we do a credit check with students every spring. For seniors, we do it in the fall and in the spring. And it's our way of saying, this is where you are right now. How is this aligning with where your goals are? Last year, you said that you were aiming to do X, Y, and Z, but I'm noticing that you had to repeat a class. So have you changed your goals, or are you going to change some of what you're doing to remediate this class that you may not have done well in? So every year, they should be revisiting to make sure that they're staying on track. Sure. Good question. Again, most students, if they are meeting the A through G requirements, in my experience, I found that I've had more students tell me, you know, Mrs. Mitchell, I really don't need to take an art class. I know you're forcing me to take this art because you want me to meet A through G. I don't need it for the college that I'm going to. And I pretty much tell them, okay, well, you sign right here in blood that you're going to that particular school because I want you to take an art, because I know that if you meet these requirements, you're going to be covered no matter where you go. So again, these requirements are pretty universal for most private colleges as well, including HBCUs. That's a good question. So just to break down each A through G, the university's way of saying the A requirement is the history requirement, the B requirement is their English requirement. It has nothing to do with grades, it's just their arbitrary breakdown. And you can see here what is required and what is recommended. I would always encourage students to do what's recommended. Okay, sometimes they will get through that second year of science, and the science requirement is the D, the lab science requirement, and they'll say, well, I did my 2 years. And my next question is, okay, well, where are you planning to apply? And they may say, oh, well, I'm thinking of UC Davis or possibly USC. I'll say, no, you're probably going to need to take 4 years of science. Okay, so again, they can't look at the minimum. For some students, and again, a lot of it depends on the student. It's very variable. Sometimes you'll have a student who is, you know, the language requirement, which is the E, is 2 years. Okay, so that would be the equivalent of taking Spanish 1 and Spanish 2. For a student who's doing really well in Spanish, or who I know, you know what, you can handle this, I would encourage them to take that third and even fourth year. Because in most schools, the fourth year is an AP class. And that AP class is a college level class. It's advanced placement, and that gets the extra weight. So if I have a student who's very strong in their language skills, but they're just being a little bit lazy and saying, well, I don't really know if I want to, again, I say, what are you going to do after you graduate? What colleges are you looking at? If you're looking at schools that are very selective and very competitive, then you know this is where you might have to kick in a little bit and say, even though it's not your favorite thing, with some hard work, you can get through that third and fourth year. Other times, I'm sitting with students who are barely hanging on to a C in that second year of Spanish. And bless their hearts, they'll say, well, I'm going to go for the third year because it's recommended. And I'll say, honey, it's recommended, but it's not recommended you take a third year and get a D in it. Okay, so again, it goes back to knowing your student. And if they're really working hard and struggling in that area, and they've had tutoring and they've met that minimum requirement, sometimes you have to pick and choose and say, you know what, maybe you stop at that second year, but you're going to definitely continue on with your sciences. That's where you're leaning toward. Or if it's a student who's maybe looking into going into an art program or an art school, you say, you know what, this is going to free you up now to take more of those art classes to help build your portfolio, to get more experiences. So again, it's not a hard, fast rule, but I always say, take the most that you can take that's going to push you to your limit without really overwhelming you and, and stressing a student out unnecessarily. Any questions about that? A full year. So like a full year of art. So the art requirement is 1 year of the same art. So a year of photography, a year of ceramics, a year of choir, a year of band. Okay. The G requirement, that extra year of college prep electives, students sometimes get confused, and parents do also, saying, where am I going to fit that in? It's almost built in automatically, because G is just any of the above that's extra. So once you've hit that third year of a language, that counts as G. Once you've hit that fourth year or third or fourth year of a math class, that counts as G. If you're taking band all 4 years, by the time you move into your second year of band, that's G. So G is more or less built in. The reason why it's really important for students and for parents to understand the A through G requirements is, depending on the high school that your student goes to or will go to, counselors and schools are having to look at multiple things. And their first goal is to make sure that the student is going to graduate. And these requirements are college requirements. For students who do not have this in their plan, students who may not be looking to go straight to a four-year college, they may not be encouraged. You know, their counselor or their peers may not be telling them or demonstrating that, hey, you should take a second year or third year of a language. You should move in that direction. So it's very important for families to understand what are your goals, because what you're trying to do may be different than what your best friend is trying to do. And if you guys are just kind of going along together, but he or she is trying to do something different than you, you could get yourself stuck not having taken what you need for where you're trying to go. And then Talithia, people who didn't get the PowerPoint, if you want to raise your hand, she has made some copies that she can pass out. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just kind of want to say something what you were saying about the recommended. I teach math professor at community college, and I get a lot of students that come out of high school, and they just get the required, and they're so frustrated because they had that whole year and a half or so, years with no math, and they didn't get a lot of it. So as you were saying, if they can handle doing the recommended, and that way they stay sharp and
Yes.
frustrated when they come to college.
Yes, thank you. In fact, I went to a Cal State, Cal Poly Pomona had a conference last Friday, and one of their big pushes is to have the kids be more college math ready. And they said that they're seeing students coming in and they're getting into college, but they're spending their summer or their first semester or first quarter or even the first 2 quarters taking remedial math classes, which means that you are paying for classes that aren't college classes. Those classes aren't going toward their college credits. And that's across the board. And I think it's indicative of the fact that, you know, math is one of those, it's the gatekeeper, and it can really be problematic. And we've had a lot of changes in math. We shouldn't be discouraged about that. I know some schools are still traditional, algebra, geometry, algebra 2. Some schools have gone integrated. We just have to stay vigilant. We have to stay on top of knowing what textbooks they're using, what's the protocol for their particular math sequence, and what support systems are in place. Some schools have support classes, so students may be in a math class, but they may be recommended to be double blocked, so that, hey, you're in an Algebra 1 class or an Integrated Math 1, but we're recommending that you take a support class. Maybe you need to forego an elective because we really want you to be well equipped to move on and not have to repeat this class over and over again. So that's important. Again, the math requirement for college is that students get through Integrated Math 3 or Algebra 2. So this is especially helpful for parents who have middle schoolers or even elementary school age students, because now you could start seeing ahead and saying, now what level will my son or daughter be in when they get to the high school? Are they going to be in Algebra 1 or Integrated Math 1? Are they going to be in geometry? Either one of those is going to prepare them to be beyond Integrated Math 3, okay? But if they're coming into high school and they aren't in Algebra 1, you can see the pattern that's about to happen. They're not going to get as far as they need to get. And that's the beauty of being here with an elementary or a middle school age child, because then you could say, oh, okay, we need to work on this now. This is going to prevent some progression that we want to see, and so we need to work on this now. All right, so how do you create a 4-year plan? And again, the whole premise is based on that A through G criteria, your student and you should chart a plan in which the requirements can be met. Now, most high schools have their own template in which the school counselors will either physically or electronically plot out the sequence of what they need to take first, second, third, fourth year. They might refer to that as a 4-year plan. Quite often, we might do that with our students maybe at the beginning of their freshman year. Ideally, it's nice to do it at the end of their 8th grade year, but logistically, sometimes that can't happen. So I'm not meeting a lot of my freshmen or our freshman counselor isn't meeting them until they get to the high school. So, but at least at that point, we could say, where are you right now, and what are you trying to do, and let's chart a course. You have the advantage of knowing, hey, if we are trying to get to a certain point, we don't have to wait for the school to meet with you when you're a freshman. We can start looking at that now. And in fact, I think this is the actual link, I believe, that is where this is located. I think that first link might have been just to the UC website. But I think this screen is actually the link that has this chart. So again, just another tool. Your school probably has something that might actually be more conducive to your son or daughter understanding, hey, what do I need to graduate and what do I need to be A through G compliant? Because there are some things that the university does not require that your school will require. So for example, PE. Most students need to have 2 years or 20 credits of PE to graduate. That's not a college requirement. So that's something that you do have to factor in that, hey, you've got to take PE or at least be involved in a sport in order to get your PE credits. So let's build that in. Tech ed or a computer class is another example of that. College doesn't need it, but the school probably will. The task for this one is have your son explain to you if he's on track toward fulfilling his A through G requirements based on his current status. And if he's unsure, have him talk to a school counselor about it. This is something that if you have a high school student, he or she should be able to, you should be able to say, hey, tell me, are you on track for meeting your A through Gs? He may not know that you know whether he is or not, but see if he knows. See if he's missing something or if he's kind of believing some myths about what he really needs. Students will often get confused about their grad requirements and the A through Gs thinking that they're the same, and they aren't. All right, so a little bit about testing. SATs and ACTs. And so you can see that this is a comparison of the two. In a nutshell, they say about a third of the students do better on the SAT, a third do better on the ACT. For another third, it doesn't make that much of a difference. I've seen over the last several years an increasing number of students who take both. Because again, it doesn't hurt for you to take both. And if there's a chance that, you know, my daughter might do better on the ACT, then of course I would want her to have that exposure. The question I ask students is, or I tell them, they say that sometimes students who struggle in math might do slightly better on the ACT. Okay, so parents, can you figure out a reason mathematically why that might be in looking at the two exams? Why might a student who struggles a little bit in math, why might they have a better SAT score or ACT score? Say again? Okay. Mm-hmm. It's broken down. The SAT is a third of it is math. Okay. Question in the back? A big part of it too is that a fourth of the ACT is math versus a third of it. So there are differences between the tests like everyone is saying, but mathematically, if a fourth of it is going to be math versus a third of it, odds are that, hey, if math really is an area that you struggle with a bit, that again, it's worth it for you to take both exams. A question?
The way that for SAT, ACT, where they start really in elementary school, learning how to get,
Mm-hmm.
how to prepare.
Sure. And thank you for that question. I skipped ahead a little bit to talk about that, how to prepare, especially for an elementary age student, because your daughter is in what grade? Fourth grade. Okay, perfect. One of the biggest things that she could be doing now, in addition to, you know, perhaps some outside activities, but again, doing well in her courses, reading. I would emphasize the reading because of that vocabulary. So if your student is here, that's a great sign because they are getting infused with math and math influences and hopefully beginning to get an even more solid idea of the importance of math. And doing well in their math and advancing themselves, taking additional math enrichment when possible. I know in our home, our daughter my husband is constantly giving her extra math books, and sometimes it's a bit of a struggle because she said, the teacher didn't give me this. But he says, yes, but I know you need the practice. I know where your deficits are, and next year the teacher's gonna assume that you can do this quickly. Sure, you may be able to divide, but if it's still taking you this long, you just need to get those skills. Sometimes it's filling those gaps. I don't think it's too early at all. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see there's a Khan Academy website. Now for, you said sixth grade or fourth grade? For a fourth grader, that might be a little bit early, but again, it really depends on her math ability.
I know too, and I'll share what I know.
Mhm.
She usually, there's something called the Charles Drew Math and Science Academy. I don't know if you guys know the one at USC.
Mhm.
They have every summer, or year round, they offer math and science. It's a math and science program primarily for students of color.
And that's been helpful because she's submerged in math throughout the year. You have to dedicate your Saturday morning, but it's definitely, I've seen her interest in math grow in science. Also, she does something called mathnasium, and mathnasium is really good because it's mental math, and she's learning all the shortcuts. I'm just looking for other options that don't cost me as much
Right.
money, quite frankly.
Right.
Because I'm not paying for a private school, now I'm paying for mathnasium. But mathnasium, if you can afford to do something like mathnasium, it helps them greatly because for a standardized test, it's the mental math.
Right.
You know? So I was just wanting to know if you know any other alternatives besides Charles Drew or besides like a mathnasium. Thinking there has to be other math and science type of experiences for students of color.
Right.
Where they can practice those, algebra should be a foregone conclusion by the time you get into junior high.
Sure. Yes.
That should be already settled. Like algebra 1 is like sixth grade.
I'm going to let some people chime in because they may have something to offer up. The second half of the parent workshop, Ivanu McLeod is going to actually talk to you about different summer enrichment, like Cosmos and different programs that are available. The Khan Academy website is free. That's one, and I don't know if any parents have tried that or had their student go on to Khan Academy. Has anybody done that? Okay. It takes some motivation. It takes a kid who's going to be obedient, and it takes a parent who's going to just stay in the fight. And I know the struggle is real because if they don't want to do it and the teacher isn't saying do it, it can be very difficult. However, if they could build that pattern, because what Khan Academy does is it helps fill gaps. And Khan Academy is actually paired with College Board. So whether you're using it as just a kind of a remediation tool, just to kind of practice problems, or if you're actually using it for the College Board test prep, free test prep, that might be a place to start. Even though she's young, it sounds like if she's engaging in these activities, you should introduce her to this. Go onto that site so she can see the types of problems, and specifically go onto the site, the Khan Academy paired with College Board. Again, it's free. The premise of Khan Academy, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is that a student can learn anything. And Sal Khan created Khan Academy because he recognized that, if you're in a class and if I got 70% and you got 100%, that teacher's going to keep going. But guess what? There's 30% of the information that I don't know. And those are the gaps that really kids start to fall in between. And the best teachers don't always know or can't always stop where every student is to say, oh, well, let's remediate this. In a perfect world, that would happen. But again, coursework moves forward, and it really becomes a responsibility of the student and the family to say, where are your gaps? Khan Academy is a great tool for that. I put books up here, and so when we're wrapping up, feel free to take a look and write down titles. These are just some that I really like. Mindset, I don't know if anybody's familiar with it, but this very much so deals with that whole notion of the notion of yet. If you don't understand something, it might just be that you don't understand it yet. And many students get stuck in that trap that I'm just not good at math. I'm just not good. Oh, that's not my thing. I'm just not a good test taker. And that's dangerous because you have to do math and you have to take tests. All the things that you say you can't do, guess what? You have to do them. So why are you going to set yourself up in already predetermining, oh, that's just not my thing? The notion of mindset is that anybody can learn a skill. It may take new strategies, it may take time, but you can learn it. And that's the beauty of Khan Academy because it is that built-in practice. So I would encourage you to start looking at that site just to see where she is with it. And again, because it's free, it'll just supplement what she's already doing. But that's definitely something that Ivanu will bring up when she comes in and does the second part. You had a comment?
There's a program called the Excel program that Cal State Initiative,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the Los Angeles Black Engineer group that does that. There's like a $50 registration, but that's how you pay. And it's designed for students, I want to say in second grade to 12th grade, and their goal is to have the child be prepared in math, language, and there's a science element to it as well. 1 year ahead of where the public school system would have them.
Okay, thank you. And it's in the summer?
No,
It's-
throughout the school year.
Okay,
It goes along with the school year for Los Angeles Unified.
okay.
There's a fall program and then there's a spring program.
Thank you. Did somebody else have a comment or a off? Then I listed here, inquire about test prep partnerships that your high school or supporting organizations might have with testing agencies. So for example, at Claremont High School, next year we will be pairing up with Kaplan, okay? That allows, Kaplan is, nationwide and everybody knows about it. But if your high school pairs up with those organizations, quite often you will get a reduced fee. And that's what we look at as a guidance team. We say, okay, we know that kids and families are looking for these kinds of opportunities because somebody said it. It's true. It's not so much an ability of the skill, it's knowing how to approach the test. Exposure, practice, knowing how to pace yourself. You may know all those answers, but if you don't know how to pace yourself, you'll fall apart under that time constraint. So again, it's the practice. And so if your school offers some type of program, look into that, because again, oftentimes it will be at a reduced rate. Some of us are also in other organizations, so it may even be your church, it may be outside organizations. Council of African American Parents is an excellent group of parents in which they do have test prep. That's a component that it's a body of people who come together, and if you're interested in that part of it, there's test prep that's a part of that as well. College Bound is another organization in which there's a test prep component that if you are interested, you can pursue that. So again, via your schools, via your support groups, ask, does this group provide any test prep? Can I look forward to any type of test prep in the future?
Sometimes those test prep places will provide a free assessment of your students' mathematical achievement and ability. And then when and this is for free, because this is how they want to let you know what they can offer you. So they'll provide this testing for free. And then as they review it, they'll tell you specifically which areas your child might need some remediation. And so if you take that information and then tailor your time on Khan Academy to target those specific areas,
Right.
so that you're not randomly trying to figure out where they might need to work their time. That might be another way to kind of immerse them in math and science over time, rather than just, finding that there's a problem and then jumping in quickly and then leaving it. Because for my students, they need to keep on math year-round. They do math year-round, just so that they never kind of lose their stride.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say the website satpractice.org is the website where Khan Academy and the College Board that provides SAT have come together, made a partnership. So they have practice SAT exam when the student takes the SAT, they'll import their scores and kind of analyze what problems they make.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to backtrack one slide just to cover subject tests. And I know this is a little bit advanced, especially for elementary or even middle school, but it's just important for you to get familiar. You'll hear people make reference to, did you take your subject tests? Subject tests are required by some highly selective colleges. So when you're looking at a college's admission requirements, there will always use a GPA requirement. There will be the coursework, usually the 15 mandatory courses that students have to take, usually SAT or ACT, and some selective schools will say, in addition to that, we need to see 2 subject tests. Students can choose the subject of their choice, so if they're strong in chemistry or math or English literature, they can choose which subject they want, but some colleges will say, we need to see that the student sits for 2 subject tests. Even for schools that don't require subject tests, a good score on a subject test could just be added value to the application. So that's something, especially for high school parents right now, realizing, especially if there are any 10th grade parents, if your child is in world history, doing very well, maybe they're in an honors world history class, we always tell our students, hey, if you're sitting in honors world history, we know you're not thinking about testing right now, you're a 10th grader, but if you're gonna be applying to a private college that requires a subject test, and you're acing honors world history because history is your thing, it's kind of like having spare change in your pocket. Maybe you want to sit for that world history subject test while the information is fresh in your mind this spring, and then when you go to apply to your college and you realize, oh, this school needs a subject test, you've already taken one. So it's just good to be front-loaded with that knowledge. And again, the Cal States do not require subject tests. The UCs do not require it. But again, if a student does very well, it could be added value, especially if they take a Math 2 subject test and they're going into a math or science major. So that's just something for you to be aware of. And you would register for that the same way that you register for the regular SAT through collegeboard.com. All right. So we talked about the courses that students need. What else helps to set a student apart from the rest? These are some supplemental things, and quite often, especially your private colleges, are going to look at things beyond test scores, beyond the numbers. So they're going to look at essays and recommendations. Again, why is this important right now? Well, that relationship that your student is building with their teachers, with their counselor, with any outside person who may be writing a recommendation for them. They may not be able to make that connection. I'm learning firsthand that they don't see as far as we see as adults. They see what's right here, and you can have the brightest, kid, but you realize they're just not thinking about 2 years down the road. So it's like, hey, you know what? This math teacher or this English teacher who's really seeing how well you're working in a group and how well you're taking leadership, this is a person that you want to forge a relationship with, because you may apply to a school that needs letters of recommendation. The more students start to write and really engage in that writing process, because they're going to write forever, but again, they're going to have to comprise an essay. And that essay, it's difficult to write a small amount of words to say powerful things about yourself. And they're going to have to learn those skills. So the essay writing and the practice that goes along with that is really critical. Other attributes that schools are going to look at: initiative, self-discipline, motivation, ability to overcome hardship. Doesn't mean they have to make up a hardship. It just means that if that is a part of their experience, that actually can be something that tells a lot about who they are. Their curiosity. So the task then, when you see your student later in the day, is have your child identify what he or she is doing now that will help establish the attributes that he or she wants to demonstrate to the college. So you may say, you know what, if a college really wanted to know something about how motivated you are, what is it that you're doing right now? Can you tell me something that you feel is really showing your level of motivation? It may not always be in a classroom situation. Maybe it's an Eagle Scout project they're working on. Maybe it's something that they're doing in a church group. Maybe it's something they're overcoming at home. But again, these are things that they need to start identifying as, oh, yeah, I'm not just here. I'm here, and I need to be looking at how am I the best school for them. This college wants the best student for them. They can get smart students a dime a dozen, but who's going to come on this campus who is an activist, who is a leader, who's maybe a strong athlete or a musician, or whatever it is that you're bringing? They want somebody who's going to help uphold their traditions and their excellence, not just come and take their education, but give to the campus. So I think they should see that colleges are going to want to know this. How are you in terms of filling this out? In the back?
I wanted to add to other factors. One big part of this process is the counselor's recommendation. And oftentimes, because schools are so large, counselors don't know the student. And I've spoken to a counselor where she responded, I don't know the student. And that's bad. So what we've done, our kids that have gone to college, is to encourage them to establish a rapport with their high school counselor, so the counselor can understand who they are, what makes them thrive, what are they about. So the counselor can get content to put on that recommendation. That is very important.
And as a counselor, I would agree. I pride myself in trying to get to know my students, but I'll tell you, it goes a long way when I have a student who, not prompted by a parent and not always with the parent, but just comes and sees me and just tells me what they're doing. And you would be amazed at how much that sticks in my mind, and it tells me certain things. And again, it fosters a relationship that's important. And we do have lots of kids on our caseload. However, those kids who really know how to speak to adults and talk to adults and say, hey, this is what I'm doing, or I'd like to get your input on something, that makes a huge difference. It makes a really big difference. Was there another question about that? All right. How do I help my child assess the best college fit? And this is important because I think that, kids hear college and they're excited about the notion of going to college, but especially at the high school level, when they're getting in the upper grades, I get concerned when I realize they don't really understand. They haven't researched to the level that they need to as far as fit. Families have to distinguish between a reach, a possible, and a good fit school. And it's important for them to understand this because I think it also helps them to establish what their goals are and how hard they're willing to work. Reach schools are those whose criteria exceeds what your child may possess. It could be a higher GPA than what your child has, test scores that supersede what your child is earning right now, or other attributes in which they may say, you know what, your student just doesn't have the level that we're looking for. it's not a slight against your child. It's just to say that that's a reach school. That if your student is doing great sitting on a 3.8, which nobody would deny that that's an outstanding GPA. But if this school starts looking at students with a 4.1, that is a reach school. And a lot of schools are like that. And a lot of students think, oh, yeah, you know, I really love UCLA, and I'm thinking I want to go to Berkeley, and I want to go to Davis or USC. They need to understand those are reach schools. It's not to discourage them, but it's to give them the right understanding of, okay, do you know what it takes to get in? Are you willing to do that? And if you're willing to do that, great, we're going to work that. But if you know that you're not willing to do that, then you need to expand your list to make sure that you have some other schools that are going to, you know, so you won't be disappointed. Possible schools are those in which the criteria matches what your child possesses. So it makes those schools more likely, although it's never a guarantee. So it's like, hey, you know what, this is a possible school for me. You know, the average admitted student has a 3.5, and I've got a 3.5, and I'm kind of falling in that range in terms of the SAT or ACT scores. Again, doesn't guarantee it, but it certainly makes me as a counselor feel more comfortable that you've done your research, because even though you have 2 or 3 reach schools, you've got a good number of possible schools on your list. Good fit schools are schools in which your child's attributes, GPA, test scores, surpass that in which the college expects, making them a more sure or safe bet when it comes to being admitted. Again, I say nothing is ever guaranteed, but there are some students that you look at and you say, you know what school are you thinking of? They tell you the school, and you look at their criteria, or you look at that student's profile, and you say, you know what, I think this is going to be, you're not going to have a problem with this school. Don't drop off, don't start slacking, and don't put all your eggs in one basket. But this is probably a pretty good fit if it's a school that has what you're looking for also. I always tell students, especially in the upper grades, that make sure that, just because it's a good fit, it may not be a good fit if you start to slack off. And that's a problem with seniors, especially they get into a college, they're really happy and feel good about it, and it's conditional. That means they can revoke that admission if they start to see that you've done things that, deviate from what you started off doing, when they admitted you. Other criteria that should be considered when you're building a college list, and again, we're talking a lot about college, and we're sitting in a room where we've got elementary age students, and I love that because my husband and I started taking our kids on college trips when they were just itty bitties. I mean, they were little, but we wanted them to see it. We wanted them to understand this is where it's located. Do you like this area? Is this a pretty place to live? Okay, well, let's look at this school. This is what it would take to get into this school. So again, that exposure, it does not matter how young they are. The exposure is what they need to see. And as you're talking to students who are in middle school and high school especially, they need to start thinking realistically about the location, how far away it is from home. One year they may say, I want to get as far away from you as I can. But as it gets closer, they may say, you know what, that sounded good, but now that it's becoming a reality, maybe 3 or 4 hours is enough. I don't need to go all the way across the country.
My daughter's a senior, she'll be graduating this year, and I just want to speak to this just a little bit because all her life, I want to go to NYU, I want to go to NYU. Well, her sophomore year, we went with the theater to New York, and she was like, oh my God, I would never want to live in New York. So that got the thing changed. And I'll never forget, first semester of her senior year, she was just like so confused as to where she wanted to go. We had done different college visits and everything, and I couldn't believe she was so overwhelmed that she really did not know where she wanted to go. There were several options, but we received an invitation to the Spelman preview night in Leimert Park, and it was my daughter's first time taking the train from Claremont to downtown LA by herself, because I work in LA, so I picked her up from the train station. We went there. And my voice is shaking now because that was the most impactful night of my daughter's life. To see all these Black women speak so proudly and so prominently and so professionally. They talked about STEM and everything. And on our drive back to Claremont that night, she literally cried in the car and said, I know where I want to go now. And so I took her in October for homecoming. She got to stay with some of the STEM students, the bio majors, and it was such a phenomenal experience for her. So if you ever have an opportunity, if your children are looking at different schools, let them go to those nights, those preview nights where real students speak, where alums speak. And I went to Spelman on exchange for a year. But I'm mommy, But that night on the way home, she was like, I know what I want to do. bioanthropology major, and she's in art, so she wants to minor in dance and theater, so well-rounded.
And since we share her, I will add, she came back changed. She was changed. It was something in her. We were still looking at other schools where she could potentially get a scholarship. And I was like, this girl, it seemed like she bypassed the scholarship. She has fallen in love with this place.
I think she almost sabotaged herself because she made it to the final round of the Posse Foundation, and that's a full 4-year ride. And in the interview, she happened, as God puts people in place, there was an African-American male. She hadn't had anybody interview her African-American before, and he was in that round, and he was a recent graduate of Howard. And when she did her presentation and talked and he interviewed her, he said, gosh, you belong at a HBCU. But they're not on the Posse list. And so he asked her, he said, very honestly speaking, if you could go to any college right now, which one would it be? Don't look at the Posse list. What school would it be? She said, Spelman. So of course, after the interview, when she told me in the car, I was like, you know you're not going to make it. But yeah, so this college visits, talking to alums, talking to faculty, it'll make all the difference in your child's life. And you can't start too early.
Right. Young people walking around a campus, you're seeing the whole area. So it's kind of exciting and upbeat. And then californiacolleges.edu is just another link. But again, it just provides more information. Okay. I'm going to kind of breeze through this, even though I know this is probably like, yeah, how do we pay for it all? But I know we're getting short on time. I will just say that most of the official financial aid documents that you fulfill or fill out happen in the senior year. The FAFSA is something that students submit in the fall of their senior year. But I will say this, it is not too early for students to start looking at scholarships. One of the tasks is for students to create an account with fastweb.com. That is a database system for scholarships. And what students do is they put in their information as far as maybe their background, their ethnic background, interests, hobbies, religious background. And that way it caters to them. So instead of fishing through thousands of scholarships that don't pertain to them, you know, I don't need a scholarship for a Chinese boy. I'm not a Chinese boy. But hey, if there's a scholarship for an African-American girl who plays this instrument and who's a Girl Scout, maybe that pertains to me. So FastWeb is an account that they might want to set up. The other thing that I would encourage students to do is recognize that, where is it? That most scholarships have the same set of criteria year to year. So it may be too early for your 9th grader to apply for the Gates Millennial Scholarship. However, how nice for her to see this scholarship requires 9 essays. If I look at that in my senior year, I will be overwhelmed and I won't want to do it. But if I look at that and file it away and know that, in my junior year, the beginning of my junior year, I'm going to start working on this, then it's not so overwhelming. A lot of students don't pursue scholarships because they start looking at them at the same time that they're doing college apps and that they're doing AP tests and things that are overwhelming to them. And then they just feel like, oh, well, I just didn't have time. Well, you have time right now when you're a 9th grader, even a 7th grader. Look at all the money that's out there. Recognize, wow, I can get a full ride if I just get this GPA. While I have the opportunity to mold my GPA, why don't I go ahead and take advantage of it? So I would make sure that I would leave you with that piece, help them realize that they can help foster the amount of money, the amount of support that they can provide you to provide their, to get their education.
I have a question for you. With the changes that are happening with the Department of Education, how is that going to affect the FAFSA application and all that stuff on what they're trying to eliminate and cut down and dwindle down?
Good question. Every year we get updates and we go to financial aid conferences just to, to find out general updates. But there's so many things that on a daily basis that are just, shocking, surprising, and just kind of unbelievable in terms of, okay, well, what's going to happen with this? Things that you might have thought were in place or that were going to be in existence. So again, I think being aware of the changes that happen on the federal level, but also helping students to start understanding the different ways to get aid, and especially scholarships. It's like, if you can manipulate that GPA to qualify you for certain things, then definitely that's what you can control. And understanding work study, understanding the different types of aid, that it doesn't always have to be a loan. What can you get that's free money? that you can go to school and you're not in debt when you come out.
I would also encourage, parents to encourage their students to apply for the community type grants and scholarships, because you may have like an LSU or the link. They're not for large money, but that first year,
Right.
it adds up and it can, help a lot to find whatever is needed.
Absolutely. Thank you. And even your employer, finding out if they offer scholarships to students. Sometimes students will come in and say, my father works for Edison, and my father works for Toyota. I'm applying for the company scholarship. So again, just finding out all the different resources. Lastly, how do you survive all of it? Because it is a lot. And organization is the key. So taking time to create a plan and working that plan really does make a difference. Just getting the information that you're getting today and that you'll get from this point forward and that you've gotten already, and just saying, okay, now it's time for us to start looking at, scholarships, and now it's time for us to start that test prep, or it's time to start working on this next math sequence. Having a plan in place and working the plan. Continuing to find supportive people, such as mentors. We all need mentors, our kids need mentors, and organizations for both your students and yourselves. I know I've been assisted greatly just this year as a new high school parent, just being around other high school parents through different organizations, and just being able to brainstorm and think, how are you handling these different situations with your child? So it's helpful to have that support system in place. Modeling for your child your own continued growth and educational opportunities. So seeing you read, seeing you take classes, and learning new skills fosters a growth mindset that's critical to their success. If they realize that, my mom or my dad, they're also learning some things, then it's not so bad that they're forcing me to read that extra book, the one that the teacher didn't assign, but that might help me to understand the concept better. So again, that's why I've got some titles up here if you want to take a look at those. Always being an advocate, but putting the ownership upon your sons and daughters. Let them know that every action has a consequence or a reward for their future. So it's like, okay, if you choose not to study, what's the consequence going to be? It's going to hurt me to see this happen, but at a certain point, I can't make you do this. I can make you do only so much, and then you have to show up and demonstrate what you know, and there's a consequence for that. Enjoy the journey as much as possible, and realize that it's always a work in progress, and relying on your inner strength and your higher power to see it through, because I think it does take a lot of inner strength, and whatever your belief system is, I know that we spend a lot of time on our knees just to kind of navigate it all. So hopefully this gives you some tools that you can take back and start using immediately, as well as start using, in the future with your kids. So, and I know we're pressed on time to start. I think we're into the second session. So with that, I will allow Ivanu to take questions while we just transition. Okay. Are there any questions at all, or anything else? The things that you've shared with each other, with me, yes, have been very valuable. I've been jotting down Charles Drew, Excel program, Phoenix Scholar, so I've been jotting things. So. Okay.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. Do you want me, I can move over, or do you want me to stay here? Okay.